Hello class, I hope you brought your notebooks because today I'm going to be schooling some of your peers. I put out a YouTube post requesting teams that you wanted to be fixed and received nearly 300 submissions. I picked 3 of these teams to improve and I'm very pleased with how they all turned out. Before we get into it though, let me explain the guidelines. First of all, when I fix a team, I will not change the vision of the original builder. Even if I find that idea unviable or a Pokemon they used strictly outclassed, I will keep the identity of the team alive. If the team isn't recognizable or if the key Pokemon is gone, I didn't improve the team, I just built a new team. And that's not what this is about. Secondly, I will be rating all of these teams on a scale from 0 to 10 based strictly on competitive viability. I'll give the team an initial rating and a rating after I've made my changes. I hate nebulous criteria. I will never give points to a team because I like the Pokemon on it or because it's cool or funny or creative. I picked teams that I found cool and creative because they interested me, but the point system is solely based on how well that team would perform at a top level. Lastly, all teams featured are built for the Scarlet and Violet Overused tier, the main format for competitive singles, and my area of expertise. Alright, let's get into it, starting with this Galarian Zapdos and Porygon Z balance by Slurpee Please. We've got an Expert Belt Galarian Zapdos, U-Turn, Close Combat, Brave Bird, and Trailblaze, and an Adamant Nature, definitely an unusual choice there, with Terra Fighting to boost Close Combat. The Porygon Z is a Choice Scarf set with Download, getting a special attack boost if the Pokemon it enters on has a lower special defense than physical defense. It's running Trick, Tri-Attack, Psyshock, and Ice Beam with Terra Ice. Timid nature on that. The Ogerpon Cornerstone is a 4-attack set, Ivy Cudgel, Hornleech, Playrough, and U-Turn with a Jolly nature. Alomomola is running a Rocky Helmet and has Flip Turn, Wish, Scald, and Protect, nothing too crazy there. Terra Steel is pretty typical as well. Only odd thing here is the EV investment. Maximum HP, 64 defense EVs, and 188 special defense EVs with a careful nature. Opting to not go with a negative speed nature or a 0 IV in speed, which I'm guessing is just an oversight and not a purposeful choice. Alomomola really want to be as slow as possible to get that slow Flip Turn. The Raging Bolt is a fairly standard Assault Vest set. Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Draco Meteor, and Thunderclap with Terra Dragon, HP and special attack invested with a modest nature. And lastly, we have Iron Treads, a heavy-duty boot set here with a super wacky set, knockoff Rapid Spin, Stealth Rock, and Volt Switch. So we have an Iron Treads without Earthquake. The EVs are really unusual as well. No HP, but there is investment in both defense and special defense, probably to optimize Wish Passing from Alomomola. And it has enough speed to hit 301 speed, outpacing Great Tusk by 1 point. I chose to work on this team because I like a lot of the cores here. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Download on Porygon Z. I think it's way better than Adaptability, and that special attack boost can make a huge difference. The team is also very well built to take advantage of Download. We've got Flip Turn Alomomola, U-Turn Galarian Zapdos, and U-Turn Ogerpon Cornerstone. Particularly Zapdos and Cornerstone are going to bring in Pokemon with better physical defense than special defense almost every time. So you can U-Turn out, go into Porygon Z, and get that special attack boost. Cornerstone and Galarian Zapdos are a good core themselves as well. I'm generally not a big fan of Galarian Zapdos and Overused because of Pokemon like Pecharunt, Corviknight, Moltres, Kanto Zapdos, but these are all Pokemon that Cornerstone either straight up one-hit KOs or puts a lot of pressure on, so these two work well together. Alomomola and Galarian Zapdos is another great core here. The Wish Passing helps a lot with Brave Bird recoil. This team also just fulfills all the typical requirements. It has a resist for every type, it has priority, it has a very fast Pokemon since the Porygon Z is Choice Scarf. So this team does a lot of things right, and there's some really great synergy and tons of interlocking cores here. That's what really caught my eye. In their submission, Slurpee Please said, "Used to be a Natdex team, but I configured it so it can be used in OU. Surprisingly easy, not gonna lie." Well, now it's time to take the wind out of Slurpee Please's sails. I'd suggest testing the team a bit more before declaring it easy and done, because despite all of its clever cores and synergy, this team is a bit of a train wreck. First of all, some of these sets are just really off, the Zapdos in particular. Expert Belt is just about the worst item to run on a Galarian Zapdos. This item boosts power by 1.2 times when using a super effective attack. It's typically used by Pokemon with lots of coverage, like Iron Valiant. Zapdos' strength is not in its coverage, it's in its high base power stabs. Expert Belt here just does nothing. U-Turn and Trailblaze barely hit anything super effectively, and since they're weak non-stab moves, even if you do get the Expert Belt boost, it probably won't matter much. And if you're hitting your opponent with a super effective 120 base power stab move, like Close Combat or Brave Bird, I think you got him. The Expert Belt isn't really needed here, it's overkill. I'd honestly rather use no item than an Expert Belt on this Zapdos. At least no item makes it a better switch into knockoff. Zapdos' adamant nature is also an insanely greedy choice here. I get wanting to be more powerful, but the drop from 328 speed to 299 speed gets you outsped by so many Pokemon. This is not the right Pokemon to use an adamant nature on. Play Rough on Cornerstone is also a very weird choice. Ogerpon Wellspring frequently uses this because water and grass are both resisted by Dragon, but Rock doesn't have this problem. So while this coverage isn't entirely useless, there are many stronger options, like Fighting coverage, for example. Grass and Rock are both resisted by Steel. Psyshock on Porygon Z is also a bizarre choice. It makes sense on a Choice Specs download Porygon to get past Blissey, but coming off a Choice Scarf set, it isn't even doing that, and Psychic coverage generally isn't very helpful, particularly when all of your other moves are not very effective against Steel. Beyond the sets, this team loses to some extremely common Pokemon. Calm Mind Iron Valiant can absolutely 6-0 this team if played even somewhat carefully. Raging Bolt is Terra Dragon, so it can't be used as a defensive response. Iron Treads is setup fodder, since it can't even use Earthquake, and Moonblast basically just rips through the entire team. Iron Defense Zamazenta completely destroys this team as well. Your one hope is Trick with Porygon Z, and if that fails, you lose. Curem is a nightmare also. No resist to Freeze Dry, and to make matters worse, it outspeeds your adamant Galarian Zapdos. Gliscor also farms this entire team. Toxic and Earthquake destroys pretty much everything. It can switch in on almost everything on the team with the exception of Porygon Z, but that it can scout with Protect every time and take advantage of it since it's holding a Choice Scarf. And I've never said this before about a team with an Iron Treads on it, but you lose to Raging Bolt, since you don't have Earthquake. Toxic Spikes are also a major issue for this team. You have 4 grounded Pokemon and no Poison type to absorb them. Having a Steel type Rapid Spinner like Iron Treads helps a bit, but it's not a solution. Will-O-Wisp is difficult as well. Nothing really likes getting burned, and there's no switch into it. Stall as an archetype is also nearly unbeatable, despite having great breakers like Ogerpon Cornerstone and theoretically Galarian Zapdos. The sets you have here just can't break Stall. If you had Swords Dance on Cornerstone or a Choice Band on Zapdos, maybe, but as it is, not a single one of these Pokemon is making progress against standard Stall. The creator Slurpy Please noted in their submission that this team is weak to Aurora Veil and presumably Light Screen and Reflect teams as well, but I disagree. I think this team has the resources to take it on, maybe a slightly challenging matchup, but not anywhere near the biggest problem. Iron Treads can knock off the Light Clay from the Aurora Veil or Screen Setter early game, and Porygon Z can use Trick to lock something into setup or an ineffective attack. With proper playing, it's manageable. Still, that's a lot of issues. Before any changes, I'd have to give this team a 3.5 out of 10. It does have a lot of great cores and some great ideas, but there are so many major problems and weaknesses to common Pokemon. The test games went about as expected. A lot of issues I anticipated came up. Zapdos barely did anything, and the Expert Belt was never helpful. Not having Earthquake hurt Iron Treads on several occasions. Will-O-Wisp was hard to handle. The Porygon Z was actually stronger than I thought it would be, but I never used Psyshock. I never used Play Rough on Ogerpon either. Alright, let's get to the fixes. First of all, the Alomomola set has mistakes. It's missing 4 EVs, so I put those in defense. I changed it to a relaxed nature. Alomomola is the physical wall here, so I think a physical defense nature is going to help more often. Relaxed is a minus speed nature. I also gave Alomomola a 0 speed IV. It has Regenerator. It wants to take a hit, then flip turn out, not outspeed and then leave another less bulky team member to take the hit. You want to move last, so almost all Alomomola should be as slow as possible. I also made it Terra Poison. This does 2 things. First, it helps with Zamazenta. If you burn Zamazenta with Scald and have Terra Poison, Iron Defense Body Press is absolutely never getting past you. Secondly, it gives you a Toxic Spike Absorber, which is huge in some matchups. Next thing I changed was this Zapdos. First, Jolly nature. Now you outspeed Great Tusk, Curem, Petrunt, Iron Crown, and Landorus, which you did not before. I also made it Choice Band with Terra Flying. Brave Bird is the most spammable move this Pokemon has, especially since it has Wish support, so we want the Terra on that type. Choice Band was miles better than Expert Belt. Zapdos was actually now scary. I replaced Trailblaze with Knock Off as well, good for generally forcing progress and hitting Goldengo. This Choice Band set also does way more damage to Gliscor, nearly one-hit KOing with Terra Flying Brave Bird, so it helps manage that threat a bit as well. On Porygon Z, I took off Psyshock in favor of Shadow Ball, and went with Terra Ghost. This was way more helpful. Now you can hit Goldengo super effectively, hit Ceruledge super effectively, Galarian Slowking, actually do damage to Petrarunt because Psyshock wasn't doing much. I used Shadow Ball a lot once I added this move. It also further helps with Iron Defense Zamazenta. The previous version had to use Trick and then let the Porygon die to Body Press. This one can Trick while using Terra Ghost, and you can put yourself in a great spot against the Zamazenta. On Cornerstone, I replaced Play Rough for Swords Dance. Swords Dance plus U-Turn is an odd choice, but I think it works here. We want pivoting to support download Porygon Z, but Swords Dance allows you to threaten Stall and other bulky teams. It also makes Gliscor no longer a free switch-in. On Iron Treads, I gave it Earthquake. It needs this to answer Raging Bolt, and it's very helpful in general. I EV'd it to outspeed Petrarunt, and put the other EVs into HP and special defense. I understand wanting to optimize Wish Healing, but these EVs are way better on the special side, and Iron Treads is your switch-in to Moonblast. I also went with Terra Fire, so it can absorb Will-O-Wisp, and it's generally a solid Terra type for Iron Treads, maintaining a Fairy Resist and gaining a Fire Resist. Lastly, Raging Bolt. I gave it enough speed EVs to outpace max speed Adamant Kingambit just to improve that matchup a bit. And I went with Terra Fairy. This gives your team a way to have a dragon immunity, and it allows Raging Bolt to use Terra defensively, notably helping it deal with Iron Valiant. I also prefer Discharge over Thunderbolt on Assault Vest sets, but this is personal preference. Even though I didn't change a single Pokemon, this team felt completely different after these changes. It had power, it had ways of handling threats that destroyed it before, but it maintained all of that synergy that made the team so appealing. I was winning over and over again after these changes. I'd give the updated team a 7 out of 10. I wasn't able to completely eliminate all the threats, and there are still some tough matchups, but it's a solid team that I'd feel comfortable bringing to an important game. Alright, moving on, this next team really surprised me. Random Guy 365 submitted a dual weather team with both Pelipper and Torkoal. The Torkoal is a physically defensive set with a Heat Rock, Lava Plume, Rapid Spin, Will-O-Wisp, and Stealth Rock. Unusual choice of Terra type going with Terra Fire. Most Torkoal want to go with a defensive Terra. The Pelipper is Damp Rock, once again fully physically defensive, Hurricane, Weather Ball, U-Turn, and Roost. Terra Ground on this one, and it's no wonder why, this team has no electric immunity. The first abuser is an Assault Vest Raging Bolt, Thunder, Draco Meteor, Volt Switch, and Thunderclap. Typical Terra Fairy, and going with a Timid nature. A usual odd choice, but a sensible one here with how weak this team is to opposing Raging Bolt. You really want to win that speed tie. Assault Vest Walking Wake next, EV to get a Photosynthesis special attack boost in Sun. Hydro Steam, Draco Meteor, Weather Ball, and Flip Turn with Terra Water. Rocky Helmet, physically defensive Corviknight, nothing unusual here. Body Press, U-Turn, Iron Defense, and Roost, but Terra Flying is odd. Between this and the Terra Fire Torkoal, I'm thinking Random Guy 365 just forgot to put some Terra types in. And lastly, we've got a standard Terra Ghost Kingambit. Iron Head, Kowtow Cleave, Sucker Punch, Swords Dance, Leftovers, Max Attack, and mostly HP, but a little bit of speed as well. I loved how creative this team was. Dual Weather definitely isn't anything new, but I rarely see Sun and Rain as a combination. And I thought the abusers were both very well selected. Walking Wake and Raging Bolt both take advantage of both weathers very well, so being able to pick which one you want for the matchup and switching it up mid-game is a really cool idea. Corviknight was another smart choice. It appreciates Rain to weaken fire moves, and it appreciates Sun, so it can solidly wall water types like Ogerpon, Wellspring, and Primarina. This team also gets credit for being quite solid defensively. No type is unresisted. There are a ton of issues though. Perhaps not the biggest issue, but easily the most emotionally devastating one. This Raging Bolt does not have Weather Ball. This absolutely shocked me when I discovered it. When I first looked at this team, I thought Raging Bolt had Weather Ball. When I put it into my team builder, I thought it had Weather Ball. It was only when I actually tried to use Weather Ball in a battle that I realized this Raging Bolt does not have Weather Ball. I truly couldn't believe it. Not having Weather Ball on a Raging Bolt that has both Rain and Sun support is insane. It's like not using Sucker Punch on Kingambit. And that wasn't the only set I found questionable, not by a long shot. The biggest problem here are the Torkoal and Pelipper sets. Dual weather teams often change what weather they have set, rain overriding sun, sun overriding rain, often in quick succession. Weather often doesn't need to stay up for 8 turns, so having the Heat Rock and Damp Rock is a bit of a waste of an item slot, and the items of these Pokemon are very important. No electric immunity is also really difficult, as I previously mentioned. Volt Switch destroys this team, and using Terra Ground on Pelipper is not a great solution. It's like putting a band-aid on a cracked dam. Raging Bolt in particular is a brutal electric type for this team to deal with. You have to count on your own Raging Bolt as an answer. This team also gets smoked by Hazard Stack, as was noted by Random Guy 365 in their submission. But I actually disagree. It doesn't just get destroyed by Hazard Stack, it gets destroyed by Stealth Rock alone. The one removal Pokemon here is Torkoal. That is extremely slow, not particularly difficult to spin block, and weak to Stealth Rock itself. Basically, if your opponent has Stealth Rock, something almost all teams have, you're in big trouble. This team also struggles a lot with bulkier teams. With both Walking Wake and Raging Bolt holding Assault Vests, we really don't have a breaker here. Stall will completely wall this, and even some balanced teams will shut this down. The speed tier is also quite slow here. We've got a 348 speed Walking Wake as our fastest Pokemon, and it doesn't get a speed boost in Sun. Priority with Thunderclap and Sucker Punch help for sure, but these aren't the most reliable priority moves. Lastly, Garganacl is a nightmare. Salt Cure destroys this entire team. When I took this team on ladder, it performed better than expected, but not by much. With how insanely weak the team was to hazards, I had to play aggressively and maintain pressure on their hazard setter, but that just isn't always possible. When I faced a hazard stack team, as you might expect, I got absolutely destroyed. Before changes, I'd give this team a 2.5 out of 10. Cool idea, and some of it is executed well, but the vast majority is not. So let's fix it. The first thing I did was change the sets for Pelipper and Torkoal. These weather setters can be legitimate threats in their own right, since the team isn't relying on them to keep weather up for 8 turns. For Pelipper, I changed to a choice spec set, with Terra Water to get insanely powerful weather balls. This gives the team some breaking power, and paired with Knockoff and U-Turn, this Pelipper gets past Blissey with minimal chip. Finally, Pelipper wasn't just sitting there as a support Pokemon, it was doing something on its own. As for Torkoal, I gave it the heavy-duty boots, and went with Overheat over Lava Plume for more immediate power, since we already have Will-O-Wisp to burn. I also gave it Terra Ground to stop Volt Switch in a pinch. This change was massive for the team. Not having our single removal Pokemon take a ton of hazard damage was a big deal. The next thing I did was change the Raging Bolt set. I gave it Weather Ball over Thunder. I wasn't a fan of Thunder, as it still has 70% accuracy in Sun, and Weather Ball is stronger against neutral targets than Thunderbolt if weather is up. I think when I made this change, team builders everywhere felt a disturbance in the force finally being corrected. These were big improvements for sure, particularly to Pelipper and Torkoal, but I knew the hazard situation was still dire. Torkoal, even with heavy-duty boots, is not enough. So I replaced Corviknight with a defensive eject button Hatterene. This would block hazards, help bring in a breaker early game to start on the right foot. It had Healing Wish for support, and perhaps biggest of all, Trick Room. This could make Pelipper or Kingambit major threats in the endgame. Unfortunately, this did not test well. I underestimated how much Corviknight was doing for the team. Particularly after making Pelipper offensive, Corviknight was useful as a defensive pivot, and it was crucial for stopping physical setup sweepers like Dragonite. The Hatterene was a good idea in theory, but I just couldn't find a way to make it work. So I moved Corviknight back onto the team. I wanted to give Corviknight Defog. This would be sufficient for hazard removal. Torkoal can one-hit KO Gholdengo with Overheat, making it viable removal if Gholdengo is the opponent's spin blocker. And if there's no Gholdengo, Corviknight can just Defog. But if I gave Corviknight Defog, I'd have to drop a vital move. I didn't want to drop U-Turn, as that's what prevents Corviknight from being passive on this offensive team. Being able to pivot into offensive threats is crucial. But I also can't get rid of Iron Defense, then I'd get destroyed by Swords Dance Kingambit and some variants of Dragonite. Then I found an unusual solution: Low Kicks. Choice Band Low Kicks over Kingambit provided such strong and reliable priority that it made many physical setup sweepers no longer a concern. This freed up Corviknight to drop Iron Defense and run Defog. I also made some other optimizations to Corviknight, giving it Terra Ground as an emergency electric immunity, and I gave it a 30 speed IV so it could get the slow U-turn on other Corviknight. Back to Low Kicks though, it did a lot more than just allow Corviknight to run Defog. Its first impression does massive damage to Raging Bolt, so now all we have to do is get a little bit of chip on opposing Raging Bolt, as opposed to somehow trying to KO it with our own Raging Bolt. It also made the team's lower speed less of a concern. With Low Kick's first impression, the team now had so much priority that I wasn't too worried about dealing with faster threats. Low Kicks also has U-turn, so it's able to pivot into threats like Walking Wake and Raging Bolt, contributing much more throughout the game than King Gambit did. These changes transformed the team. With solid hazard removal, Pelipper as a breaker, and Low Kicks as a pivot and revenge killer, I was getting nothing but wins. One additional change you could consider making is going with a proto speed boosting EV spread on Walking Wake, but I had similar results with both sets, so it's hard to say which is better. You may also want to consider Terra Dragon on Walking Wake to resist electric. After these changes, I'd give the team a 7.5 out of 10. It's a super strong and threatening team, but it does still have some rough matchups. Certain hazard stack builds can be brutal, Garganackle is still a nightmare, and no electric immunity is far from ideal, even if it is more manageable than before. Before we move on to the last team, I want to mention the Venezuela charity tournament happening on July 18th. It's a Pokemon Champions tournament made to raise funds to help those affected by the devastating earthquakes in Venezuela, organized by a group of Venezuelan players. The entry fee is to donate $5 to some hand-picked charities that have proven their effectiveness. All of the info is in the description. Alright, now for the final team, a Raging Bolt plus Weavile balance by Yay. We've got a Choice Band Weavile, Triple Axle, Icicle Crash, Ice Shard, knockoff with a Jolly nature. I'm a big fan of this set. Icicle Crash is so underrated, most people don't run it. Choice Specs Raging Bolt, standard stuff here, Draco Meteor, Thunderbolt, Thunderclap, Volt Switch, Terra Dragon, modest with max speed and special attack investment. Mostly standard physically defensive Corviknight, Defog, Brave Bird, Roost, and U-turn with Terra Dragon. Only odd thing is heavy duty boots, not a common item on Corviknight at all. Then we've got Assault Vest Hatterene, Psychic Noise, Draining Kiss, Nuzzle, and Mystical Fire with Terra Fire. EVs are a bit all over the place, but mostly just physically defensive with a bold nature. Completely standard leftovers Ting-Lu, Stealth Rock, Earthquake, Ruination, and Whirlwind, Terra Poison. And lastly, Choice Scarf Goldengo with Make It Rain, Shadow Ball, Trick, and Focus Blast, Terra Water. Alright, so what really stuck out to me about this team was that it was very well built. Without any changes, this is a good team. We've got a great core of Weavile and Raging Bolt, that Ice-Electric synergy, and Physical Special synergy. Raging Bolt Volt switches on special walls and brings in Weavile. Weavile doubles out on birds like Zapdos, Moltres, and Corviknight and brings in Raging Bolt. It's a great pairing. And we've got a Corviknight Hatterene core, very solid for preventing hazards from going up to support all of that switching, since Raging Bolt and Weavile don't love entry hazards. All types are covered, nothing is unresisted. Weavile also has priority, which is great, and the team generally has good speed tiers. Every element of a good team is here. Now, there are still issues. The creator Yay noted that fire types are an issue, and I concur. Raging Bolt is the only fire resist, so Pokemon like Ceruledge and Cinderace are going to put a ton of pressure on this team, and you really don't want your main breaker to also be your only defensive answer to those threats. Yay also said they were having an issue with Stall, and I can see why. This may seem odd with a great breaker like Raging Bolt, but Stall has a lot of ways of getting around this Pokemon. It only has 8 Draco Meteors, and if those get PP stalled, Gliscor becomes a permanent wall, so you have to be very careful with using Draco Meteor and predict correctly. Longevity is also an issue. The way to break stall with Choice Specs Raging Volt involves Volt switching on Blissey enough times that you can 2-hit KO with Draco Meteor, but it can take a while to get enough predictions correct to set up this situation. If Raging Bolt gets hit when entering the field, you might be KO'd before you can set this trap up. And as for Weavile, that's pretty much useless against Stall most of the time, as it gets hard-walled by Toxapex, Alomomola, and Dondozo, even with the Choice Band. So, fire types in Stall were noted by Yay, but those aren't the only problems. Raging Bolt is not just the only fire resist, it's the only water resist, so a lot of water types are scary here like Primarina and Hisuian Samurott. King Gambit is a bit scary as well. The current plan is basically just offensive pressure or trick with Goldengo, which may work sometimes, but a Choice Scarf King Gambit actually looks pretty terrifying against this team if it has a Swords Dance boost, so maybe the play is you have to go for Focus Blast. There's really no good answer. The Corviknight set is also just not ideal. A big part of the reason that Corviknight is such a good Pokemon is that its Steel and Flying type is great against entry hazards. It is unaffected by all entry hazards except Stealth Rock, which it only takes 12.5% from. So using heavy duty boots over a Rocky Helmet or Leftovers is a very odd choice. Still, none of these issues are major problems. When I took this team on the ladder, I won every game in a fairly dominant fashion. I did encounter some challenges when facing a choice-banned Crawdaunt with Raging Bolt as my only water resist, but it wasn't too difficult to play around. Initially, I'd give this team an 8 out of 10. I knew there were improvements to be made though. The first thing I did was just slap a Rocky Helmet on Corviknight and give it a 30 speed IV for slow U-turns on other Corviknight. Not a huge change, but it helps. The next thing I did was change Raging Bolt's set, removing Thunderbolt for Dragon Pulse. Giving Raging Bolt a way to hit ground types if Draco Meteor PP runs out makes it much better in the stall matchup, and it's just a nice strong stab in general. The big change to make, though, was to Gholdengo. I had my eye on Gholdengo from the start because it wasn't defensively crucial. It helped with some threats, but it wasn't doing anything for the team that was difficult to find elsewhere. It was providing good speed control with its Choice Scarf, but the team already has a very fast Weavile. Now, Weavile doesn't outspeed Zamazenta or Dragapult, and it ties with Darkrai. Gholdengo outsped all three. But Zamazenta, Dragapult, and Darkrai are all Pokemon the team is quite solid against defensively, so I felt comfortable giving up on outspeeding them. It made a lot of sense to remove Gholdengo for either a Water type or a Dragon type, to provide another resistance to Fire and Water and take the pressure off of Raging Bolt. I ultimately settled on Alomomola, specifically a Tickle Alomomola. This synergizes very well with Weavile, lowering defense to make breaking easier or allow Ice Shard to kill a sweeper it otherwise wouldn't. Tickle also allows Alomomola to stop Dragon Dance Dragonite, which was a concern if I removed Gholdengo, since Trick Scarf was crucial for dealing with some Dragonite sets. For my other three moves, Wish, Protect, and Flip Turn. Nothing special there. I went with Terra Ghost for a backup answer to Iron Defense Zamazenta, another role Gholdengo previously filled. Alomomola does a lot for this team. It provides a solid switch into previously major threats like Cinderace and Ceruledge, it adds another pivot to bring in Raging Bolt and Weavile, and its Wish support can easily keep Raging Bolt healthy in more drawn-out games, making the stall matchup extremely strong. In my testing, I faced a stall team and destroyed it 5-0, and it would have been a 6-0 if I didn't get horrible RNG. This improved version also took on Storm Zone, a legendary tournament player using a Blaziken team. Alomomola was great in this game, answering Blaziken and healing up Tinglu several times. I ended up barely losing the game due to horrific RNG throughout and a brutal back-to-back Dark Pulse flinch at the end that I certainly won without, but it shows the strength of the team nonetheless. The only other change I might recommend is Iron Defense on Corviknight to answer Kingambit. If Kingambit doesn't end up being an issue, feel free to keep U-Turn, but it does worry me. I would still keep Brave Bird though. That's important for Ogerpon Wellspring, especially now that there's an Alomomola on the team. You could also try a Rocky Helmet on Alomomola. I threw on Leftovers, but I'm sure many items would work. You could even try an Eject Button, Red Card, or just Heavy Duty Boots. After these changes, I'd give this team a 9 out of 10. It started very strong and got even stronger. There are some challenging matchups, but not many. This is an extremely strong team, and it got me to top 10 on the ladder just casually testing and trying things out. Well, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. And if you want your team to be featured in the future, I am accepting submissions right now in the comments section. Just put your team's importable text in the comment, say what your team struggles with, and any other comments you have. Make sure to post the actual importable text, not a PokePaste link. Links will be blocked by YouTube. Also, if you have any ideas of how these teams could be made even better, let me know in the comments section as well. As always, all teams are linked in the description, both original and edited, if you want to try them out. Thank you to all who submitted a team, and thank you for watching. Class dismissed.